So we're gonna go.
Yeah, can you come back? Could you come back? Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and let's pause for just a minute. I think in an hour. You come back in an hour? What's your
I
schedule?
cannot come back in an hour.
When could you come back?
We, I mean, potentially be in touch after, but it would be like after 5.
Oh, okay. How do I do that? Should I call you?
Sure.
Okay, I think I have. Text me yourself, okay? Okay, and I'll call you and it won't be much after, okay?
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Hi, all right, everybody, welcome back to Housing, House General and Housing. And today is Thursday, May 1. And I'm proud to say the House just passed something, Proposition 3, which will be remembered for a long time, assuming the voters. We have been discussing S-127, which is the Senate housing bill, somewhat like our own, and which may end up being the vehicle for us. And we have been specifically discussing work which the Commerce Committee did a really great job of putting together what's called CHIPS, which is a tax increment financing approach specific to development specific. And I asked Sean Gilpin, who runs VHIP, to come and testify very briefly to answer a question. So Sean, would you like to just tell us your name for the record, and then I'll ask you the question?
Of course. Thank you. My name is Sean Gilpin with the Housing Division at the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Thank you. This won't take long out of your busy day. It has to do with VHIP. I know, and the reason is what we've been hearing testimony in is the question of how one enforces income limitation on projects which are essentially private and not necessary. They don't involve a partnership with a nonprofit or a governmental entity whose job it is to do that all the time. And one of the questions is, how do you do it with VHIP? Because there are limitations in what it has to rent for. But the scattered nature of the apartments or houses that you operate on makes it almost impossible for there to be any nonprofit entity that's administering it. So how does that happen?
It is a great question, and it's something that we've been working on improving. The way that the way it's structured right now, when a property owner signs up for VHIP and signs a grant agreement, what's called a covenant is filed with the town records that's attached to the property. I'm not an attorney, but it acts in my mind as a layperson similar to a lien. It sits there whenever the property is sold. A real estate lawyer would do a title search. They would find that covenant. So that stays with the property until it's discharged. And it's discharged at the end of the service period. So during that service,
5 years or 10 years, right?
Exactly. The 5 or 10 year service period. During that time, we require each property owner to recertify annually and attest to the fact that they are charging the fair market rent, the HUD fair market rent, based on what is plotted out and published by the Department of Housing and Urban Development each year. Those certifications are logged, and we tend to do a desk check on a certain proportion of them, or we'll reach out to the tenant and verify that rental rate is happening. And then at the very end of if we determine that the rent is not being charged at the right rate, then because every one of these, so desk checks are just to sort of verify, every one of these go against the calculator in order to determine whether or not the rent is being charged appropriately, because there are some allowances for utilities and whatnot, so it's not a solid rent for everybody. And then the ones that come into our office and are not in compliance, we reach out to the property owner, notify them of that, and give them some options to cure that. Typically, we'd like the rent to be lowered and the overage be reimbursed the tenant. Worst case scenario, well, middle case scenario, I guess you could say, is we say you're not in compliance, and we're marking that down, and this is not a year of service, essentially, and so the end date of that 5 or 10 year gets pushed back accordingly until they're back in compliance. And then at the end of the period, we discharge the covenant from the town records, or rather, we actually have to record another document with the town
You
records.
record a notice of discharge, right?
Exactly. And so that is how it works. It relies a lot on the goodwill of the folks who are participating in the program. We have nowhere near enough person power to, verify every single one of these that are coming in. But we hope that, not unlike an audit, the goodwill, along with the concern that one might be picked out of the bunch for further investigation, is enough to keep folks relatively in line. And also, there is the opportunity for a tenant, once they're housed there, especially if they are in the 5-year and have been referred by a coordinated entry organization. We trust that those service providers are providing the information that if a tenant doesn't feel they're being charged the right rent, they know how to reach out. So we would certainly investigate any complaints that we receive from the tenant side. But it's a pretty bare bones, but it still is. It would be an awful lot of staff hours in order to really do a full census on every one of these units. You've pointed out that the scattered site nature of it is a challenge.
As it is now, with how many VIAP units are there out there at this point that you have to account for? About
There's about 500 that are completed right now. We just got new numbers today, so I'm sure we'll be updating that shortly.
And how many people in your operation devote themselves to doing this review that you described?
Right now, I have one full-time equivalent that focuses solely on VHIP, and she's actually a limited service. I put some time into it, and then it's probably about a quarter to a half a time, depending on the time of the month, that I have another limited service position working on this. And it is an inadequate staffing amount, but we make it work.
Right. So one of the things that you said is interesting, because you're always looking for a remedy. So if you have someone who's not been paying or charging the right amount, you always have the option of pushing back their 5 years or their 10 years. You said that's the middle option. What else have you had to do?
We haven't had to do anything else, but I mean, I imagine, and I'm speculating here a little bit, which I shouldn't do in this seat, but there are likely other legal ramifications. I mean, if somebody refused to comply, I imagine that we could lay claim to some of the funding at point of sale, things like that.
Right.
That would be much more
Right, probably, yeah.
court intensive. Yeah.
Great. Are there any questions of Sean? Sean, thank you. This was actually quite helpful.
All right,
Thank you very
great.
much.
And
Thanks, Sean.
Okay,
always welcome to come back. Thanks.
all right,
Good
thank
to
you.
see you.
Likewise.
At this point, what I'd like to do is continue the committee discussion that we were having. I would just add it's obvious, I asked Sean here just because one of the questions was raised was, how do you do this? How do you enforce this kind of thing? And what I get from Sean was, well, it's not like you need a lot of people, one person or 1.5 for 500, but you do need somebody. And it's a governmental entity that's doing it. And he had a particularly good remedy available, which was just push their time back, yeah. In other words, if there was a 10-year period and they discovered that they've been charging the wrong rent for a year or two, then it's not, it doesn't expire in 10 years, it expires in 12 or whatever. So what we did was, as I remember, what we did, we'd gone through the affordable housing part of this, but only to the point of saying, here's what the two of us were throwing out there for your consideration. And essentially what it's doing is, Dolly, could you make copies of the affordable housing piece?
Oh, yeah.
And distribute them to the committee?
Yeah.
It's essentially the approach that we were suggesting was to leave the intent language the same. Partly because the intent language in some ways is quite clear, in the sense that it talks about encouraging the development of primary residence for households of low or moderate income. And it's quite clear. It also, the attractiveness of it was its flexibility. And it's sort of doubly flexible in the sense that there is always a possibility that if someone is not complying with that, they that were the appeal to the board, to that board is.
No, that's on
That's on
page
the,
8.
usage, the percentage.
No, it's
Project
also, it's
criteria.
about housing development furthers the purpose of section 1907. So we propose, so it's clear in what the purpose is. But we were proposing that it needs to be tightened up a little bit. And we proposed an option, which is to tighten it up by adopting a definition of low income, moderate income. And we have such a definition which will be passed around. What we didn't do, it didn't change the intent. It didn't change the flexibility. It just added definitions so that it wasn't just completely open-ended. We didn't put in a requirement that of an inclusionary, specific inclusionary requirement of 20%, et cetera. That's not in there. So the definitions of low and moderate income that we selected are, I should add, they're not particularly stringent in the sense that they really are quite inclusive. The definition that will be passed out to you in a minute of low and moderate income is cut off for renters at 80% of average median income. And homeowners at 120% of average median income. at 80% of average median income for renters, you're talking about a little more than 2/3 of all renters in the state. So we really are, it isn't just, one should not labor under the illusion that we're talking about the very poor. We're talking about, they're included, but we're talking about it reaching up into what at least I think of as our middle class. The rent affordable to 100 and to give you an idea for I mean, of course, it depends on the size of the family, it depends on all that, but we're talking about affordable rent of $2,000, 2-bedroom, and $2,300 for a 3-bedroom. So again, these are not, that's a level which is already pretty high.
Seems pretty standard.
At 100, I'm just giving you guys information, at 120% of median income for ownership, you're talking about over 120,000 income for a family of 3.
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
about what you just said about the $2,000 a month rental price? So that's the price that
That's
Is
30%,
considered-
yeah,
afford, that would be 30% of
yeah,
a person at 80% AMR.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And household, and at the home purchase, the ownership, at 120,000, you're talking about in the, 370 grand or something for a 2-bedroom, 420 some thousand for a 3-bedroom. So I just want to say, for what it's worth, I mean, however it hits you, is that the definitions which are being cast out, and I'll explain in a minute. You want to go to the middle of the page, X, those definitions, they do what I just described. So
Yeah.
they're not, it's funny, we have these ideas in our head about what's poor and what's
Yeah.
middle class. And
Suddenly we're all poor.
yeah, you can, either we're all middle class or we're all poor. I'm not sure how you would say it, but these are people who, I read the list of jobs. I mean, these are people who are, it reaches up into what I think of as the middle class. But of course, all Americans think they're middle class. But I don't know if Jeff Bezos does, but anyway, so that's the compromise. I am not pretending it is, it's somewhat stricter than what came over to us. In the sense it nails things down a bit. But it is still, does not contain a specific inclusionary demand. So what do you guys think? Please.
So the mantra in last committee was, spell it out and, like, shall, all of that. I think that, we're trying to give parameters, but I feel like, maybe without incentives, either carrots or sticks, it's harder to imagine that these things will be followed as much as, like even the types of proposals that the board could end up facing or what the board ends up deciding, like they can say, well, it was either this or it was not going to be built or, whatever people can say. And there was, I think, a proposal floated in, the Let's Build Homes testimony about upping, the portion of the property education tax increment that can be retained during the 20 years. And I'm just wondering if that can be, which I mentioned to you, whether that's the carrot that could at least incentivize people, because at the end of the day, we've heard from the builders, they would love to build more affordable housing. I think that if we don't give them a financial incentive for doing it, all the language in the world and the definitions may not actually create what we're trying to do. And these are our state dollars. So if Let's Build Homes is keen to have that be part of it, that might be some leeway. So right now they would get up to 70% of the education property tax increment for up to 20 years. And maybe we want to offer 80%, add language that would say, or 80% if 20% at least is affordable housing in this project.
Yes.
I was gonna say, I really appreciate, Rep Dodge bringing that point up, and, it would have some intent that is stronger, that would point just, it is very loose, the current that we were discussing, so I appreciate her bringing up that discussion, about what that would look like, but yes, I believe it was in the Let's Grow Homes proposal,
And it was discussed in comments.
right?
I don't know exactly why they didn't put it in, but yes.
I actually, that is something I could support. I'm anything if not blunt. And I think we need to be really honest with ourselves on, should that percentage change? We can support it till the cows come home. But if it doesn't pass upstairs, I'm concerned that percentage wouldn't. I know that we already have an uphill battle on this language and this program. So that's, like I said, I can support that. I think, again, I would not be supportive of making this any stricter without incentives to developers. I'm just really concerned about it actually passing. And then just the other thing I think is, when we think of middle class, I think we need to think about the missing middle, and almost, I think when we think about like a benefits cliff, we often think of those who are lower income. And I think a lot of times when we're talking about middle income, there's kind of a group of people who don't really qualify for any sort of assistance. Whether that's, and we did great work, and I'm really proud of the work we did on the childcare front, and this is absolutely coming from a place of privilege, and I acknowledge that. My husband and I we're paying over $20,000 in childcare, and none of what we've done has helped us. We have, over $100,000 of student loan debts because we're still relatively young. So I think that we absolutely need to be looking at affordable housing. But there is this group of people that we need to make sure that they are giving back to our community, they are working, they're helping our economy, but they don't qualify for anything. And I think that's something I appreciated about the flexibility in this language, is that we're also looking at homes for those individuals as well. So I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I absolutely agree. And I support that. I want to make sure. At the end of the day, I will do just about anything to get this language passed. And that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone at this point. But and maybe that's conversations that we have with the members that are sitting in the committee upstairs on.
I should mention that I just had such a conversation.
Oh,
Fantastic.
wow.
Why are you letting me talk then?
I like listening.
Yeah, I think that was.
I just want to tell you, after I talk to you, here's the problem. And I talked to Emily. I can see several ways of dealing with this. But here's the problem. If you say 70% is the floor, right? And then you go to 80, I don't really know if there's any, as you said, I don't know if there's really any willingness to go to 80 upstairs. Because there's worry, they are worried about the ed fund. Okay,
Right.
the other way to go is to drop the floor.
Yeah.
Follow me? In other words, you could say everybody gets 50%, except if you're affordable, you could, well, or 60 or whatever, you go to.
Yeah.
You go to 70. The problem that I've heard in the hallway is that a small difference in endpoints is not enough to really incentivize anybody. It has to be bigger. So what I said to Emily Kornheiser was that we were thinking about this, but I didn't feel, and this is just me, I didn't feel like we had taken any testimony that could support what the floor would be. In other words, at what point is it just not worth doing? Because the amount of you can build off this increment is just not a significant part of the infrastructure. And that I didn't have the expertise, nor did we really have the time to take all the testimony, figure that out, but there was a certain amount of interest in that. And I was wondering if she had interest in that. And the answer was maybe. So one thing I could do, she has asked that I testify before their committee about our bill, just like we had Marcotte and Chair Marcotte and Vice Chair Granning here. I could testify before their committee. I might even drag somebody along.
Then I have to run the committee.
Yeah,
You
that's
both
what you
go.
would have to run the committee. What's it worth to you? No, anyway, I could tell them that that the sense of our committee would be that if that is possible, it would be a good thing to add as a stimulus, but that we did not have the material in front of us to define the boundaries. Or if you guys felt like you wanted to, you can define the boundaries now. I'm not sure how, but
Do we,
No, go ahead.
I'm just thinking about time.
Yeah.
Do we want to just vote on it with a small increment change with what's been recommended and hope that Ways and Means in their wisdom can, I mean, there's nothing preventing anybody from taking testimony,
yeah,
right?
and there's nothing preventing us from just putting something in here
Yeah.
and then changing it. That's true.
Which I think indicates, like there should be some kind of incentive written into this bill that distinguishes, a middle income from a lower income development.
Debbie? You've been
I just-
patiently waving your hand.
Well, thank you for noticing. I'm just having a hard time with understanding when they say like under this definition, when they look at like even home ownership, they said that has to include it's the cost of the ownership, the principal, the interest, the taxes, insurance, any condo fees are not going to exceed 30%. I mean, those fees I see as changing fees, or they could. I mean, condo association, they could have, their fees go up. Maybe you had flooding there. Now you have to have flood insurance. I mean, I can just see things going up. So is that at the day that transaction takes place?
Actually, well, it's different. This is absolutely standard language.
Yeah,
And in fact,
I just want.
yeah, I know, I'm gonna explain. Actually, this principal interest taxes insurance called PD. In the everybody, Petey, everybody, you know, everybody likes to have their own, what do you call them, acronyms
Acronym, yeah.
that maybe they sound like they know something and everybody else doesn't. So, Petey, anyway, it's just standard way of, in other words, this whole idea that ideally you don't want to spend 30%, more than 30% of your income on what? And the answer is heating. It's just standard. And what it means is that the 30% of what is that the what is bigger. So the 30% is bigger. You know, in other words, it's not just, but my understanding is in something like this, it would just be at the beginning. Because that's when it would happen. It would happen right at the beginning. There are other places like in these situations, which you've heard people testify to, where there's programs, home ownership programs and stuff like that, which are kind of run by nonprofits. They may sort of repeatedly look at it. But I think that the principal doesn't change over the life of the loan, the interest doesn't change over the life of the loan. And I think in most of those situations, the other initials, insurance, condominium insurance, and tax is within their control. Taxes, maybe not, but I wouldn't, you know, I don't know, but for us, it would just be right.
Okay.
So how do people feel about whether we should? It's certainly doable. I'm just going back to your suggestion. Should we add in an incentive? I mean, we don't have to, you know, of 10 points. And just as a placeholder so that it's there and that it gives advocates a chance to argue over it in front of Emily's committee.
Sure.
Yeah,
Perfectly happy to have them argue about somebody
I
else's.
mean, sometimes people kick, I think, some things in here, right?
Yeah, well, I'm asking seriously. How do
Yes,
people feel?
I would support that.
Well, others?
I can work with it.
Right?
But I also am pragmatic, and if people feel like that'd be a killer,
I don't think it's killer. I just don't think, I think we can, well, we can do it anyway. We could do it 60-70 instead of 70-80. Which do you want? Make it.
actually,
I like 70-80. And because, I mean, honestly, I think this is the thing is, they're going to either throw. But it started at 50. If it started at 50-50 is where it came from the Senate. Is that what they said earlier?
No,
No?
that's for the percentage.
Oh,
So
okay.
it had to be 50% commercial, 50%.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it started at it. I think Let's Grow Home started at 80.
started at
Oh,
80.
Yeah,
okay.
and we're willing to go to 100 for low income housing.
Okay, oh,
But of course, that's no skin off their nose because they're not dealing with the fear that they're not dealing with the guardians of the education fund, which are upstairs, so you want to go 70-80? Okay,
I feel like it's like the, one of those. like,
Yeah.
Auction or.
60, 75?
Yeah, yeah.
65, 75.
guys, somebody's got to decide. If you don't want me to do it, you get it. Okay,
Does that make sense, Mary?
Sure.
Elizabeth? Because you are also a fierce defender of the education fund, so I would like to hear.
Well, you know my answer then.
Oh, so you don't want to touch it?
I don't.
Okay. Even for increased affordable housing? Because I feel like if we're gonna put any dollars into it, we need to put teeth into this bill.
Can I make a comment on that?
Of course.
Like, yes. Yes, we are putting dollars into
There,
it.
yes.
Yes, but I also want to say, like, I think we need to also recognize that, like, a lot of this is going to the municipality, and I think the individual, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think voter turnout can always be higher. But there's an opportunity for individuals within the municipalities that this infrastructure is gonna touch, that it's going to benefit, will also have a vote. So that's just something I like to keep in mind, that I think, you know, our municipalities also have a really good understanding of what they need in housing and workforce. And once again, I like how flexible this language is.
Some municipalities need the infrastructure, but not the low to middle income housing.
I can't think of a single municipality that does not need housing.
Springfield,
Oh, yeah, they don't need any more low income.
they don't need any more low income housing.
They have 60%.
They need middle.
I talked to Alice about that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I think that's one reason. why I
Windsor's
like these
another one.
Definitions, they aren't really low income, they're.
Well,
low
that's
income.
true.
Yeah.
low middle, so
That's
they do need workforce.
Are you saying, I'm not sure I know what you're saying.
Okay, I think I'm gonna say. Once again, I will be supportive with whatever gets us through. That being said. There are individuals on that committee that I do understand affordable and I mean, don't get me wrong, I will be one of the loudest advocates for affordable housing. But upstairs, I think there is a push for more affordable housing. I think that if we send this to them without changing the purpose, but putting in the definitions, I'm really concerned about what would happen in that committee.
Which way
I
is
don't
it,
know.
which way do you think your fears would be somewhat attenuated or made worse by the suggestion that we also add in an incentive?
Like the 70%'s already in.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to incentivize.
In other words, do you think it's better to go 70-80 as an incentive, which pushes up the TIF a little, or we go 60-70? I'm not sure that it matters too much because they're gonna do what they want to do.
I think they're gonna do what
Exactly.
they wanna do.
Mhm.
I just can hear all the comments about the ed fund, and while absolutely we need to ensure that we're protecting the ed fund. I don't know, sorry, I think I'm just talking out loud at this point.
Are you, does this, but I'm just trying to get the gist of where you're headed. I mean, it sounds to me like you're saying, to the extent that we're worried that the guardians of the ed fund are gonna be opposed to this, it would be better to go 60-70. To the
Yeah.
extent that you're not, it might be that you're worried that we might not have enough tax increment, it might be better to go 70-80.
Yeah,
Frankly, I have no idea what the reality is in the world.
That's where the testimony needs to
Yeah.
come in, because
So
developers need to
my
say, we're
question is,
penciling
does
that.
anybody have a preference?
I don't think I have a huge preference. I mean, it's an improvement.
Yeah.
You said versus better than what is available now.
Okay,
The larger picture is just, I'm trying to get my head around how because I keep hearing the language, and this will derail everything. I keep hearing the language, it's taking from the education fund. And those who are passionate about that, some of them, I'm not necessarily in the legislative body, but I mean,
yeah, right,
they will not think about what we're doing beyond that.
well, it might be opposed to all of it, yeah.
Yes, and I'm trying to figure out how to best communicate that what is happening is that we're growing a basis for we're adding slower to the education fund than we might otherwise for the purpose of growing what's available for the education fund.
Did you notice that the PowerPoint that Miro Weinberger did you see that he sort of had to skip back over the first page? Because it wasn't for us, it was for Ways and Means.
Right.
So they heard it. I mean,
Yes,
They've heard it a lot.
Yeah.
Now, whether they believe it, I think some believe it. I can't speculate,
Yeah.
Some people believe it, some don't. I just can't speculate. You know, there's a whole history with TIF. We're trying to change things. So
So that's actually just. Sorry, I actually
you
just,
decided to put her on the spot.
I did, but I texted her before.
I was like, how did you have like telepathic?
PSP, yeah.
Tiff, Tiff.
Her tip fighting sense went
Yeah.
off.
Go ahead, ask her the question.
Well, I asked Chair Granning to come in here. Oh, Vice Chair, sorry.
In theory.
not taken.
Right.
Don't tell but I asked her to come in here and answer some questions because we haven't had the testimony, but you've had the chip language for a month, three weeks.
For a long time.
Yeah.
We've been marinating in it.
Yes, so I think we have some questions on the affordable language and why you didn't move forward in putting more guardrails.
Yeah.
Do you mind answering some
But
questions?
You want me to sit?
particularly.
Yeah, do you mind?
Yeah,
Thank you.
particularly,
yourself for the
introduce
record.
yourself, please.
Are we on?
Yeah,
Yes.
we're on.
Hi, everybody. Edie Granning, Jericho, Vice Chair of Commerce and Economic
Okay,
Development.
I think one very specific question is, we heard, what we're talking about right now is whether we should add an incentive, which we know that, or heard that you guys considered, which was going 70-80 or,
We had a couple of different ways that we were looking at putting some incentives in for more affordable housing. What
what were they and what did you do?
one of them, well,
Or what did you?
what we ended up clearly not leaving it in there.
Yeah, right.
But so one of the incentives was a higher percentage of increment to go to the developer. One of them was so limiting the infrastructure opportunities to us to only what is absolutely required for a housing development. If you wanted not to do affordable, but if you wanted to do affordable, you could have sidewalks and playgrounds and, more recreation kinds of things like that. So those were two things that we were looking at. We decided against both because we were looking at how do we create a simple program that is easy to use. And as we go forward, because we were getting some testimony that there was a lot of complexity. And we were having issues on our committee with the complexity. And if we're going to offer incentives for this, shouldn't we offer incentives for other things too? And so it got to it's better to just start here. And if we see, it's our job, right? If we see a law that's working a certain way and not doing the things that we actually want it to do, then we will make changes. But what we did instead was we put in the constraints around looking at the purpose
Yeah,
more clearly,
More
which
clearly.
is
we like that.
affordable and workforce housing, right? Like that's the purpose is to build that. And so if the purpose is to do that, do we need to incentivize it also? Because then we're saying maybe the purpose isn't to do that. Purpose is something.
Did you take any testimony on the 10-point spread or I'm interested, we've been talking about incentivizing via just what you talked about, 70-80 or 60-70 or whatever. Did you take testimony from anybody on whether that would have any effect, whether it was enough, whether it would make any difference?
We did not.
Okay,
It's a political thing more than anything else. And so we decided not to open that can of worms.
right. So, surprise.
Politics in this building, never.
There aren't any.
Never. No, I think that's helpful. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And I figured instead of just pretending like I knew the answer, I'd ask you to come in.
Any other questions of Edie before we let her go? Get out of
Go
the
back to
spot.
data
Privacy, do you want to swap?
In that conversation, do you know if there's ever been any modeling if the increment was below the 70% that's in here?
In other words,
Why are we at
Why at 70,
Yeah.
why at 80? Was there ever presented modeling to support it?
We did not go down that
Math,
path
okay,
at all. What we keep hearing is every incentive is really important and it's super expensive to build. And with all of the uncertainty around what's going to happen and how things are federally, something clear and consistent and available to people is really important right now. And so if we can do that, we should do that.
okay.
Can I ask one last question? You had made a comment that obviously if we changed the incentive or the increment, it would be a different incentive, but there was a concern about offering this incentive versus other incentives for other things. Do you have any examples of like what an other incentive would be?
Oh, well, so it was the two things. It was
Yeah.
the money and it was the infrastructure.
Right,
Yeah.
So if we limit the available infrastructure, if you're going to build a housing unit that doesn't include 20% affordable.
Yeah.
You can have access to water, waste and clean and utility hookups and, whatever the basic things. And we couldn't come up with the language, right? What those basic infrastructure things are that allow for a housing development. So we were getting stuck on that. And then if you were going to offer the 20%, you could have access to a more, more sidewalks,
Like,
more of the things that make it a desirable community to live in and not just the things that make it able to build.
Okay,
So.
anything else? Thank you so much, Edie, for sharing.
Thank you so much.
You were on the record.
Need to walk
The
down the
record
hall.
will be reflect every word you say.
Right.
I just want to say Indian, which is, I'm not personally too interested in the second approach, which was to change what you could build.
No.
Because it's a big, sewer, water is just such a big, it's such a
So
big,
fundamental.
it's so big financially. Sidewalks, playgrounds, water features. It's not a big deal. Yes.
I think it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gail.
Oh,
So I was just wondering, does it make any difference that the definition from the housing authority is different than what we're talking about? Because what you have in here has all to do with HUD.
This is a pretty, the housing authority,
What do you mean?
yeah,
What are you trying to say that we should?
Vermont State, a housing authority has a definition of what low to moderate income is.
that's different. I think.
It's different. It's 50%.
Yeah, I mean, this is. There,
Because this is low to moderate.
this is low and moderate and.
The low is 50% and moderate is 50 to 80%.
Right, so this is inclusive because this would be up to 80% AMI, so you
Yeah,
could
this is
have.
low and moderate.
That's why.
By
it's a
80%.
higher- That's why it's a higher maximum income level, but it would
Okay.
include all of up to. Are you saying that we should go lower than 80%
No.
AMI? Okay.
Well, in light of what was just said, I am asking again.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
You have a question enough.
Yeah, you did, sorry. I figured if I waited long enough, you wouldn't remember.
Put you up.
I don't remember tonight.
Well, I'm sure you'll think of it again.
He was thinking.
If not a different.
Yeah, okay, I'm just asking to revisit. You heard Edie, their reasons. Thank you very much for getting her in here. Does anybody,
Water features.
water features?
This is, well, not necessarily.
I just jogged his memory.
No, she did, jog on memory. In low income housing historically, and I'm thinking more notoriously like the projects in New York and Boston. A lot of time in Chicago, they're very bare bones. Not particularly attractive and a glorious failure in terms of health communities. So sometimes the things like the sidewalks, the pavilion, the
Right.
play structure, they're elements that they destigmatize
Yeah,
they, they lend themselves to people building community, which is more healthy for them going forward than everybody in their own little box somewhere with no place to. So there's a place for it in low income housing.
Yeah, no, the way it would work, the way their idea worked was only low income housing would get those things.
Oh, I see. Well, okay.
Otherwise, the builder would just have to pay for it.
To your point, I think, we also know that part of the, I mean, those are big cities. We don't even have a fifth of the population of one of those cities.
Right.
So just to,
The lesson being, if the housing is.
but so taking the, the
Yeah.
idea of, low income housing out of a city. One of the lessons from those is that, it's much more successful. Residents are much more successful in mixed income.
Yes. Yes, like Cambridge and Rise.
Right,
Very good.
I'm going to take it unless someone tells me no. Let me put it this way. I'm going to take it that we should ask our attorneys to add in an incentive that takes it from 70 to 80.
Would that be including the 20% language?
No,
Okay.
Wait, can you just explain that?
no,
carefully?
We're not gonna have
those
a-
are separate.
Us. Okay,
Those are, I.
Can we put it then that it should be at least in? I don't know. I mean, it makes sense to me that it should be somewhat proportional to,
Well, it's the 70 to 80, which just say based,
Can you say what the language,
yeah,
plainly what the language you're suggesting is?
I can try. The language would add to this.
What?
to page 14.
It would, the
line
language,
11 and 12.
the language. Somewhere in here. Well, I don't know where it would go.
11, 12, if that's where education property tax increment,
Oh,
that's what.
11, 12. So,
Page 14, lines 11.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Down there at line 11. It would say education property tax. It would say up to 70%. With the first sentence would be what it is. And the second sentence would say, for projects of low or moderate income, it would be 80%. That's all it would be.
I could be supportive of that.
That's all. It has nothing to do with the 20%.
Okay.
I was just, my original suggestion was to only give that additional carrot to projects that had some minimum of affordable as defined.
Yeah, so
Early
you just use our
definition.
definition, you would use the definition.
And I don't want you or anybody else to think that I am not a huge proponent of affordable housing. And I strongly object to even the 70%. So that, and the 20 years. Or up to 20 years. I would obviously be even
Worse, right?
worse for more than that.
That might sell better upstairs if we did 60, 70, 60.
I don't think you should. I don't think we should base our decision on the so-called warriors protecting the ed fund.
I really like the infantry.
Hopefully there are more than just
Yeah.
people in one committee who are
Right.
protectors of the ed fund. And realizing that the more you take away from rural communities' education fund, the more their schools are gonna close, and the impact to rural communities is going to be outsized, and it's not right. So depending on where you plan to build these houses, again, taking a step back and looking at what do you want to do? The question always being, do you want people to move here or not? And what is going to make people move here? Yes, housing, but also our family. Do we want families to move in? And if that's the case, why are we doing all these things to whittle down our small towns and close small schools? And whether you think this is directly related to that or not, in my opinion, it's not taking that step back. It's staying focused on housing and housing development when those two things go hand in hand. And I don't think it's right.
Elizabeth, I think, is expressing a fundamental concern. And I think I have my instruction.
Do you want to take a straw poll to make sure we're all comfortable with it?
With everything? Or
Not
just-
with every, I think, well, fundamentally, I think we need to take the straw poll just on the idea, or at least talk about all the ideas that we need to get to the attorneys to make changes on
Right,
for tomorrow. So we
Okay.
can vote for that.
so I'm asking then, we'll do this quickly.
Sorry.
No, sorry.
Can we add other
Sure.
questions for the attorneys?
Um, well, we've said from the beginning that people can add. We've got the list that I passed out, and I added Joe's. Yeah. 60%.
Yeah.
Commercial, residential, 70%. Okay. And is there anything else that people, and I also have residence versus domicile. And I also have concern over the sham sale. Anything else? Yes, and then yes.
Under those primary residents, I would like to see if we could have put or domicile.
Okay, well, I've got that.
Yeah. Well, I would set the little or in there.
Yeah, okay.
And
Yeah.
Gail, did you wanna try to figure out the mismatch between? No, we figured that out, sorry.
I think we figured it out.
And did you have an idea?
I have two.
Yes, shoot.
Still thinking about a couple of projects that are concerned with refurbishing large buildings without tearing them down because it's not really an efficient use of funds. Going back to the school project that I mentioned earlier, I'd like to add in some flexibility over the square footage because in a school project like that,
Oh, do you mean?
the area.
So
Can I finish my sentence first? So, for example, in a school where there is a basketball court or a theater that could be used by the public, so it still exists for public use. It is impossible to offset that with additional square footage. While not knocking down the whole building or making it into it would not be possible to refurbish. And I think repurpose, sorry.
No, I'm just trying to understand what
I get
the, sorry, I'm not following, but it's okay.
She's saying that-
The 80%
Residential.
residential area as part of the,
70. Yeah.
I'm talking about the percent of residential area. When you're thinking about, let me finish my sentence. When you're thinking about a school and repurposing a school, so taking a step back again, when we are thinking about all of the schools that potentially will close and the fact that, which we heard testimony on, that planning a future for those buildings is, and being thoughtful and purposeful about what to do with those buildings. We should not exclude them from being repurposed, but if they have a theater or a basketball court or something that the public at large, the town, could still use, if we keep a rigid number of square feet that has to be, let me finish, that has to be used for the purposes of residences, then that precludes the use of the reuse of those schools or other buildings. And so I'd like to add some flexibility in there.
Adaptive reuse.
But I thought
Adaptive
that's the
reuse.
second part of that
So
sentence.
I just want
Do we
to,
not already have this?
It is.
They wouldn't need this program at all.
They do have infrastructure, but not for
Efficient.
residences.
They
Not
might have
sufficient
to-
for
They might
residences.
have to change it.
They may have a bathroom for a bunch of kids, but that's not having a kitchen in every unit. That, you know, the infrastructure is different and that capacity may be different.
And within the village, I think total value and usage might not be as different. I mean, you're running a cafeteria.
We don't know.
For a couple hundred kids
We don't know.
versus a couple dozen little kitchens.
I'm sorry, I'm
We
I'm
could-
gonna interrupt really quickly. I'm so sorry. I think that's already answered and taken care of in this bill already.
Where?
With the auxiliary chip board, who are saying if you don't fall under this percentage, it goes to the board and the board's gonna take into consideration the municipality, the application. That's why that language is here for those projects that don't fit into that percentage square footage percentage.
I thought that was for a particular purpose, though.
No, no.
Not for any particular.
Under
purpose.
project criteria on page 8.
Line 16.
Does that include a parking lot at a school?
That's the whole point. Anything that enters into this, whatever the calculation of square footage. So whatever is counted as residential footage and what is not. It doesn't even matter really what we say the floor is, because we've given this other alternative option. You qualify for this funding program if you have at least 60% of the gross floor area of the projected housing development dedicated to housing. And it furthers the purpose of 1907, which is low and moderate income housing. Or the second path to qualifying for this, if you don't meet that top criteria of the percentage, right, of housing, it's up to the board to decide whether it will meaningfully address the housing needs of the community, and the board's affirmative determination will satisfy this project criterion.
So doesn't that cover it all?
It's a, well,
My belief.
okay, it's very easy for me to make an inquiry here. What if I just tell them, I'll just tell our council, we could do it tomorrow in session, or I can do it. We're just gonna tell them there's a little concern about adaptive reuse here. And so we can ask them whether they want to put in a reference to adaptive reuse. Being more flexible with respect to adaptive reuse, because that's what this is. In adaptive reuse projects, I mean, there might be, I think she's right. I think there could be any number of things where it just swings the ratio all off for no good reason. I mean, no one would want, let's say that there's a gymnasium and everybody says, wow, we should use it as a gymnasium. It's non-residential use, probably commercial use. We don't want to make them close a gymnasium just
No.
because it doesn't make 70%. So it's easy for me to mention an adaptive reuse problem.
That's a great illustration of why it was problematic.
Yes, Mary.
I just wanted to say that, in Rutland, a school that was next to the church was taken over and they put apartments in there. And it had a basketball court and it had a stage and an auditorium, and they kept all that. And it's great because, they have basketball teams, they have meetings there. I've been to meetings there in their auditorium. So I would think it would be great to keep those. College of St. Joseph, when they closed, the Rutland Rec Department uses their gym. And I've been to performances in their auditorium.
Sit down.
I do know that we have a person that has, I don't know if he's bought the whole thing or part of it, but he has moved offices over there and he plans to, let's say, hire CDL drivers and have a place for them to stay. And will pay for their CDL license as long as they stay with the company for so long. So, you know, I think, you know, that type of thing is a good thing.
Okay, so here is what I see, where I see it's going. I am going to prepare a piece of paper which has everybody's ideas listed. Which I think everybody's nodded their head over. Okay? Then, and I'm gonna have have it reviewed by critical individuals. And then tomorrow, when John comes here at 9 o'clock, I'm gonna go over it with John and say, here are your drafting instructions.
I don't think, is it John?
It is
Oh, this piece?
this piece. Hear me out.
Wait, are we meeting before the board?
No, well,
We can.
We
I'm
can.
staying over, so I
okay,
can
I'll tell you
be
what.
here at 9.
Why don't we be here at 9? And
We have to tell.
thank you for the idea.
I'm only supportive because I just have to walk across the street.
Okay. No, really, just, it's one chance for everybody just to see it. Then after the floor, I'll go over it with John, we'll all be here. And then I think either I'm gonna have to have head nods or hands up. Because I don't want John, we do not have time for John going off, redrafting. And not, you know, when it comes back, somebody says, what? I would have supported this, but, okay, but two other things. One, Cameron has told me almost everything that else is done. In other words, you've heard it all. There's no surprises. He didn't have language for Michael Gaughan. The last time he was with us, he didn't have Michael Gaughan's language on the fund transfers. You never would have remembered this kind of thing before. You've obviously just gone off the legislative end. She's nodding like. So anyway, really, where we get our jollies is beyond me. Anyway, so there'll be a few things he'll want to go over with us. But he'll be, so will he be available at, how are we gonna do this? Will he be available at,
I have him scheduled from 11 to 12.
okay.
Great.
Then. I met with the speaker. And I explained that the committee was divided on the question of where we should put 169. I explained, she asked, is this a partisan thing? I said, no, committee's much more thoughtful than that. I said, we have a very thoughtful committee.
We really
I
do.
said, everybody was actually pretty much divided inside of themselves on what to do. And the real issue is what's the wise thing to do. And I said to her, here are the concerns. And I just listed out the pros and the cons. And she said, I'd like you to put it in the housing bill. So that's,
And I have agreed that I'm going to vote for that as well, if it's a vote.
and that's where it's gonna go. Do not ask me to tell you that that is the wisest or the unwisest thing. I'm just telling you, I think I didn't even vote, remember? We had but it was 5.
Would have broke the tie.
We didn't vote. And we're gonna do that, so I'm gonna tell Cameron to dump it in there. And then we'll have everybody nod their heads, and then they'll go off and draft, and then tomorrow afternoon, when they are done, they are coming back in here and we're gonna vote. Okay, guys? And then we're gonna party. No.
And Magali's
okay.
gonna make us a sign.
Yeah, you guys will get a second sign.
Yeah.
You did it. You passed S 120.
So.
I will bring a playlist.
Okay, and we're gonna do that. That's the plan. And I can't thank you enough.
Oh,
Sorry, are we,
What?
so are we gonna do a straw poll on this first?
Well, would you like me, I was figuring it tomorrow morning. I would have the revised
All of
version
that.
of this, all of it. It's gonna look like this. Well, no, without the scribble button. It's gonna look like what I passed out, okay? It's gonna be a list of changes. And I'm gonna ask you guys, are you okay with this? And I'm saying, either we have head nods or hands up or something, okay?
With the changes.
Yeah. So,
are we?
yeah, you could vote for all the changes and vote against the bill.
There are people who do that.
Yeah.
There are.
You can.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course. Nobody gets,
no, I was
We're not
saying
gonna-
it's happened before.
yeah, right, okay, but these are the I just wanna know, because I don't want them redrafting it
Yeah.
when someone says, wait, that's not what I meant. Yeah. People can
So
say,
tomorrow morning
okay,
is our chance to give.
9 a.m.
9 a.m. and
Yeah.
I will send it out to everybody. And we'll have copies here. And we'll do it. And then they'll redraft, then it will come back to us and we will have discussion and a formal vote.
Sounds good to me. Are we, what time I forget, when are we done today?
We're
now.
I'm not going to say we're done because she's
Oh, right.
so trigger happy.
No, I was just wondering, cause, I'm hungry.
Yeah, well,
To be honest.
there is.
I know, I saw
The
that
Vermont
state
State
colleges
Colleges
has a
are having
buffet.
a buffet, guys. Oh, they are.
And you didn't eat lunch, did you?
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just wondering on that 169.
Yeah.
Page 1. Line 8. When we're talking about the social security numbers
Yeah.
and tax identification, all that.
Yeah.
The lawyer from the Vermont, I forget the name, the,
We're alleged.
no, it wasn't Rural Edge, it was the lawyer from the landlord.
It's the Vermont Landlords
Vermont
Association.
Angela
Yeah.
Zakowski.
She wrote she wrote us a letter about changing the wording a little bit.
Yep.
And just putting in, like, if you don't have a social security number, you can accept these things, et cetera. Are we gonna make those changes or are we keeping it like this?
I was planning on keeping it like this. The theory, here's why. I mean, that doesn't mean I'm right. Migrant justice, you remember the bill was originally drafted? It just said it eliminated social security. You can't ask for social security. Now, why did they want that? They wanted it because they wanted to take away the stigma of somebody having to say, I don't have a social security. We didn't go for that. We decided to kind of a neutral place, whatever, and just say a landlord has to accept any one of these three and make it clear that any one of these three is okay. That's kind of was the middle ground. The other option is what Angela wants, which is to say, or, you can accept something else, but you got to give a social if you've got it. And we didn't, so we stayed with the middle.
So.
Because go ahead. I mean,
So
I'm
just to
not,
add to, when we had other legal experts look at that language and because I looked at that and I thought, this is weird. Why would the landlords even propose this? Because essentially it would turn them into ICE agents, right? It's like, now I know who is undocumented, who doesn't have a social security number. And that is something that any state that has passed these kinds of statutes, like they then need to protect the landlords from having to become the people that record and then could be then asked to report out. And that is exactly what the landlord said they did not want to have happen, right? Like nobody wants to become the keeper of that knowledge. Like the same thing with the colleges when we passed tuition equity for people regardless of migratory status. They were like, we do not want to hold any records like this. And so that is why if you put it into statute the way that that's worded, it's basically saying you need to identify yourself as somebody who doesn't have a social security number to rent from me.
I know what you're
Well,
concerned.
I mean,
I know what you're
I
saying.
just get a lot of letters from landlords and that's not how they see it.
Yeah, I figure what you're concerned about.
Yeah.
Is you think social security numbers are, even if you have the others, social security is better. So what you really want to be saying to people is, if you've got a social, that's what I'd like. Right?
Yes. Yeah, we had testimony that it's probably the best way. But other ways can be dealt with. But
Well, let me ask
just
you.
that whole
Well,
section.
actually, this is a good, let's have this discussion for a minute. I'll tell you where I'm coming from on this, with me, but also a suggestion. I feel like as a matter of law, it's better to just have them all equal. I don't want to rank them. That's where I'm coming from.
Mhm.
However, one of the things that Angela objected to with the language, which frankly I originated, which said, you gotta put on your form that you take all three. You know what I mean? We could take that out. We could just take that requirement out. Angela objects to it. She says it's unprecedented. I don't agree with her, but I wouldn't object terribly to taking it out. I just want to know.
So take out on the form,
The language that's, let me get the bill.
Are you saying the option?
No, it wouldn't change the substance. Let me just. Where? It's what? It's I'm sorry, give me a minute here. 165, okay.
I'm impressed you have all those folders.
Okay. All right, okay, so it says. To be clear. It says, in order to conduct a background or credit check, a landlord shall accept any of the following. Okay? 2. And this is the part. A residential rental application shall inform an application that the applicant may provide any of the above forms of identification in order to conduct a background check. The reason I put it in there is I figured the way landlords and tenants often interact is either an online or paper application. And that I felt like it ought to make clear that anything goes. Angela objected to that on the grounds that it was unprecedented and I guess too oppressive or too, I don't know what, I'm not going to speculate. I favor leaving B, the one that says A, B, C, any one of those. I favor leaving those the same. I'm less powerful on the issue of the form, but it's up to you guys. What do you think? Leave it in, take it out.
I feel leave it in,
Would
and
it
as long as social security
Change
is not on the
people's
top.
votes?
No, I don't,
So then.
I don't know if it would change your vote.
It's a question of leaving that second statement.
Yeah,
Or not.
yeah, the second statement, which is that the rental application has to state Inform the applicant that the applicant may provide any of the above forms of authentication. In other words, you know, if there's a form in it, just instead of saying just social security number blank, it would just say social security number, taxpayer ID or other government, yeah.
I think. And this could be out of left field and I think one of the concerns is not future applicants. I think it's the notification of current tenants. Was my understanding of one of the concerns with the notification. And the full.
Oh, I hadn't meant that. I mean, I had just, all that was motivating me was, I just figured landlords very often don't even talk to applicants, you know, the applicants just go on the web or whatever, or they give them a paper form and that ought to be the place, but, you know, that's a little one thing.
So are we going to have a chance to mark up that section or?
189, we've taken testimony, we have marked it up, we can always mark it up more.
Wait, are you talking 116?
116.
Okay.
I think that we should insert a phrase that says an applicant has the right to request a lease in a different language.
You have not taken testimony. What are people's thoughts?
It's part of the, to me, it's part of the protected class thing, language access.
So adding more to the form essentially, like you have to add, you
don't have to provide a form in all languages, but the tenant has the right to have a lease in a language other than English.
I personally wouldn't feel comfortable adding that in without taking testimony.
And I will just say that in practical terms, like what I see happening in the immigrant community is a lot more familiarity with tools like Google, like that you can literally scan a document and hit whatever language you want to read it in. It's happening more and more in our school, like it's happening in our schools more and more. You know, it's really amazing what is out there. I am all for making it easier. I am not all for relitigating with hotel and the language. And so I would rather is because I agree that, you know, the thinking behind it is in the real world, how is this going to work out? Just like we took all the testimony, and one of our first bill that we put out was about when you sell property that should be on some FEMA map and there's no FEMA map, what do you do? And it was essentially to protect the agents, right? That they were like, these forms really matter, and these being able to have like a new column that allows, I don't know, so I do kind of think that it's important. This is where a tenant would be informed of their ability to give or not give, or whether they can apply or not apply.
Right. I admit, reluctant to add that at this point, just because I feel like it's a real major addition. And after, you know, the deliberation we've gone through, I'm reluctant to add that. I also don't know how it would work. I mean, if someone came to me and said, well, you got to do your lease in Chinese, I don't know where I'd start. And that's an expense. I'm pretty sure the Landlords Association would go nuts over that. And the question is, we would talk again and it's one thing if it's in Spanish, but what if it's in something else? And I worry that we would have to take substantial testimony on that issue. That's my concern at this point. And I'm not sure that it wouldn't be viewed as an additional burden on landlords that would cause them to even more violently oppose this than they are. Well, some of them are, some of them aren't. I guess what I'm inclined to say is I'm gonna leave it the way it is. And people are just gonna have to land where they land. And I hate to do that. I'm just feel like we've been at this 169, it's been around here a long time. I think we need to move on. Question is, should we revisit this? In the next session? My feeling about the idea of language accessibility is that we ought, if we take it on, we ought to take it on broadly.
More broad, I agree.
And the
Like
question is,
workplace.
well, and the ballot, and I mean, there's a lot of places that I think could be. I'd almost rather put the onus on government, but that's just me. And I do think that there's a point there. We do have a lot of nationalities in this state. More and more. And we wish we had even more. Yeah,
No, I just won't be able to support it because I have my voters that I have to answer to. And they do not like that language.
yeah, okay.
You can keep the same information, just putting in different contexts.
I understand. Do people want to? Anything else? Yes.
I have one last thing, and I want to bring it up now so I don't spring it on the committee tomorrow. AGC reached out to me regarding.
What's AGC?
That's okay, the general contract.
Thanks.
Okay. He was on it. I was gonna be like, what? But so the list of contributors to the Senate Study Committee on Universal Design,
Yes.
not ours, theirs, the one that's in S-127. We have the Builders Association. And they made the differentiation between the Builders Association are really or they're really developers who are creating single family homes, which is fantastic. But AGC tends to do more multi-family units. And I would like to have them added to the list because I think we want to include.
They're not on our list?
I think they're in our list, but they're not in the Senate list. And that differentiation.
Bless you.
Bless you. Actually, I think it's really important in what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, as I remember, it's not on my piece of paper, but I have to put it there. Do I remember correctly that at least in one place, if not two, they left our committee out?
They left us out.
Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
the chip
Wanna report
language
things.
for the report that they're gonna get, our committee is not included.
That's before they saw our cabaret skit.
I just want to add another tidbit. Yesterday, our Rutland County presentation, we meet every Wednesday morning, and yesterday we had one of the biggest landlords from Rutland County. I brought him in, he met you, Stephen Box. He takes dilapidated homes and builds apartments. He took a grocery store and put in apartments for veterans, homeless veterans. He does this all the time, refurbishes. And he doesn't ask for any form of identification. He said sometimes he doesn't even know their name, but I think that's a stretch. But anyway, he is amazing. And he does this. He works with the other supportive agencies, but he does this, and the cost is like half of what the state costs to do apartments. So, but anyways, he's an interesting character, but anyway, yeah. Doesn't ask Doesn't it, you don't, yeah, social security card, somebody, no, I don't know, I don't. You know,
Yes. Well,
I don't think he's,
okay,
whatever problem he's had, I don't know, he's taking care of it.
we can deal with that. All right,
That's just, sometimes the conversation.
yes, is there anything else that needs to be discussed in this committee, formal committee meeting before we end?